The perfect edge painting is the end goal for any luxury leather crafter. And today I'm going to teach you guys exactly how to get the perfect edge paint every single time on your project with these three steps. We're going to do prep, we're going to do paint, and we're going to do finish. Let's jump straight in and I'll teach you exactly how to get the perfect edge paint every single time. This video is sponsored by John Lynn Leather. I'm super grateful for his sponsorship on this. He sent me one of his electric creasing machines, so don't forget to subscribe and I will do a full in-depth review on that very shortly. Okay, so like I said in the intro, we're going to do the absolute ultimate in edge paint, in how to edge paint your project. So I'm going to use two 1.5mm thick pieces of goat skin. This is from Oran, France, so it is legitimately French goat skin. It is the only goat skin I use. I'm going to use two pieces, not three, just because there's not a lot of difference between them, and I wanted to show you guys on something, a typical thickness. 3mm is typical of what you're probably going to be doing. So I'm going to glue these two pieces together, and then we're going to stitch them. I know this is an edge paint video and not a stitching video, but you wouldn't really be edge painting without stitching, so I thought I would show you that. I have a full tutorial on how to get the perfect stitching, so I'll put that in the comment in the description box below, so please do go check that out when you finish watching this. But without further ado, let's learn how to edge paint. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to sand the edge, because even though there is a clean cut edge, it's never actually completely clean unless you're using a clicker press or whatever it is, or laser cutting it, which I am not. I don't have a laser cutting machine. So it's really important that you sand from the outside in for the first step. And that's because when you're sanding, if you sand down the edge, straight down the edge, you will mushroom out your edge. So I'm using a John Lynn Leather. He's kindly sponsored this video, and I've been using his creaser for the past couple of days just to get used to it, and I absolutely love it. So we're going to crease the edge as well as painting it, as well as stitching it, sorry. I'm going to use this little pot for my edge filler. Now the thing about painting your edges is you need to get a completely smooth finish. So Uniters have two products that they sell. One's the sealer and one is the filler. That's why I got a bit confused. I have both of them. The edge sealer is for if you have a completely flat edge already and you just want to seal it to stop the absorption, to reduce the absorption before you paint it, because these products are designed to make the edge really susceptible to sticking to edge paint. Because one of the problems you can have if you don't use one of these products is peeling after time. This is designed specifically to get your edge to last for as long as possible. So I wanted to show you the edge filler because it's really good at closing those gaps. Now Uniters recommend doing one thick coat, and after you put that one thick coat on, letting it dry completely, and they say 20 to 30 minutes for the first coat to dry. And then if you're happy with the result, sand it and then put your first coat of paint on. If you're not happy with the result, you can heat it with about an 8.5 or an 85 depending on what machine you're using. Smooth it down with the heat. Don't go above 220 degrees however, so be careful. And then sand it and then put another coat of paint on it. So that's what I've decided to do for this, because I want to get a really nice smooth edge, and a lot of you guys are going for that rounded finish. The sealer is better for a flat edge, the filler is better for a rounded edge. So whatever you find, whatever aesthetics of your edge you're going for. It doesn't matter for the structural anything of the edge. This is just purely to prepare for it. So I'm using a 320 grit sandpaper to smooth the edge filler down, because I want to get it quite flat, not completely flat obviously, but quite flat. Prior warning, this video has a lot of sanding. I've sped it up, but there's a lot of sanding in edge painting, as I'm sure you're aware if you've tried it in the past. So I have sped it up, but yeah, enjoy the sanding, learn to love it, because you're going to be doing a lot of it. And now we're going to go onto our first coat of paint. So I would highly recommend for your first coat, first of all, after you've mixed it, to tap it to get any air bubbles out. And then you want to put a relatively heavy coat on, because this is essentially your foundation. If you don't have edge filler or edge sealer, this is your foundation coat. You can negate everything I've said before this. If you do use that, this is still your foundation coat of paint. So you do want to go relatively thick on this coat. A lot of this, because obviously there's a lot of sanding like I just said, a lot of this paint will come off. It won't dribble off obviously, but a lot of this paint will be sanded off. So bear that in mind as you use a lot more paint than you think you're going to use. So I only use Uniter's edge paint. I don't know if I've mentioned that already, because I really like their paint. I find it very it has a really nice consistency. It's really easy to mix, don't get a lot of air bubbles, and you get a very nice finish. And it's also heatable, which is really important for me, because after you've done your first coat of paint, you then want to heat it again, the same temperature you did for the filler or sealer, depending on which one you use, but you want to heat it again at 85 to get it as smooth as physically possible. And then after you've got it as smooth as physically possible, we're going to sand basically all of it off. We're going to sand it down, and the whole point of sanding in this exercise is to get the high spots off. So when you start, most of it will be a glossy satiny finish, and then as you sand down, it'll all go completely matte, because you're getting rid of those high spots with the sanding. That's the whole point of it. That's the whole point of sanding with anything. You're getting rid of high spots, and you're revealing the low spots, and then you're building back up again to the high spots. So we're using 320 grit for this. You can use 220. I would recommend 320 for this first step of painting itself. Through the prep phase, the first phase with the sealing or filler, you want to use as heavy a grit as you have. So this is the second coat. Now, one of the points of using the filler or sealer is to have as few coats needed of paint as possible. Not because paint is expensive, partly because of that, but also because paint is not designed to fill cracks. It does, because it's a thick substance, but it's designed to finish the edge. So that's why you will have to do coat after coat after coat, because you're trying to fill the deep spots. Be careful not to put too much on, because if you put too much on, it can dribble over the side. So after we've done that, our second coat, we want to go over it. We want to go over it lightly with the 320 grit again, but then we also want to. We're going to go over it afterwards in the 600. We're going to start moving up the grits or down the grits. I can't remember what the terminology is. But after we get that nice and smooth, before we put the next coat of paint on, we're going to go to 600. And this is going to be to start smoothing that down and start getting rid of those very deep scratches that sandpaper puts in. Because one of the issues that you'll have start chasing your own tail. If you don't start getting finer and finer with the sandpaper, you will be chasing your own scratches, not the grooves in the leather. So that's why you want to go down to the 600 and then another coat of paint. But if you're paying attention, you'll notice that this coat of paint is not nearly as thick as the previous one, and that's because the lighter the sandpaper that you're using, the lighter the coat of paint that you need to put on. Now, if you want a really rounded edge to your paint, you're going to be using more of it to get a nice rounded edge. If you want a nice flat edge, that's why I've gone somewhere in the middle here, because to cater to all of you guys. If you want a flatter edge, you'll basically brush it on. You won't use a stick like I'm using here. The lighter you put it on, the flatter the edge can get. And the lighter the sandpaper you're using, the flatter the less edge paint you're going to need, because you're not filling in deep grooves. I know I said the edge paint doesn't fill, it does a little bit, that's why it's a thick material, but you get what I mean. You guys are not stupid. So that's the next coat basically done, and like I said, they are getting lighter and lighter. So each coat takes about 20 to 30 minutes to dry, depending on where you are in the world and what temperature your studio is. I'm starting this at 320. I did one very light brush at 320 before moving to 600, just to take the tiny little bubbles out that I created in the last coat. That's one of the problems that you'll struggle with, is if you introduce a bubble or two, you'll have to go back down, because you'll have to sand out the bubble basically. And then we're gonna move that's what I'm doing there, is I'm sanding out a couple bubbles that I introduced. So you can always fix these problems, it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of sandpaper. So that was a very light go over with 600, with 320, and then you're gonna really go to town on this thing with 600 grit. You're gonna get it really, really nice and smooth, because there's not a lot left. There's one coat left, because you could leave it at this point because you can't see any of the leather underneath. You could leave it. If you don't want to use much paint at all, you can leave it once you can barely see the layers that you're covering. That's kind of the whole point. But if you want to have a really nice, perfect finish to your edge paint, you want to do one final coat, which will be the lightest one you do. And then after you've put that final coat on, you'll see what happens last. For the final coat, you want to make sure that it is flat as possible, so you don't have to use a heavy grit sandpaper. I like to have my polisher as well polished as possible, because you want it to be really, really smooth for when you're going over the edge. This is again a John leather creaser. I absolutely love this handle. This is one of my tips I had before, but the handle is so good. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my full in-depth review of his electric creaser. Spoiler alert, I'm in love. But you do want to make sure that that tip is, I'm using an S0.5 tip, and you want to make sure that it is as smooth as possible. We're going to set it to 60, and then we're going to go down the grits. So we're going to go to 600 lightly, and that is a very, very light pass. I'm not pressing hard at this point. I'm literally letting the sandpaper take off as much of the high spots as are left, and then I'm going to use a 1200 grit. Now this is basically a polishing cloth at this point. 1200 grit has basically, it's incredibly smooth if you've ever used it before. You can go even further than 1200, but I haven't really found the need personally. And then you're really going to go hard at this. Not hard as in pushing hard, but you're going to go as much as you can without taking the edges, the sides off, the sides of the edge paint, and to get it as smooth as you can. Whilst our creaser is heating up to 60 degree, level 60. And then in one long sweeping motion, you don't want to stop and start at this point. You want to go from one end to another. You can go in different directions, but you don't want to go back and forth, if that makes sense. And you want to go as slowly as you can without burning the edge. And until the entire thing is a uniform glossy finish. Put a little bit of wax on, rub it with a cloth, and you are done. And you have a perfect edge finish. The perfect edge painting is the end goal for any luxury leather crafter. Thank you guys so much for watching. I super appreciate it. I hope this was very useful to you. I love making these videos, so don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button and share it with all of your friends. And I will see you next time. Have a phenomenal weekend. Take care.